Hi, I'm Brooke Albert, and it's so great to be with you again to talk a little bit more about restorative practices. So, today I'm going to give you a little bit more information about the psychology behind restorative practices, specifically the psychology of affect and the compass of shame. Don't let that freak you out too much or make you want to check out. We won't hang out there too long, just long enough to learn a little bit about the way that God has wired us and how that works with restorative practices. So, we're going to begin with something called the Nine Affects, which is based on the work of a man named Sylvan S. Tompkins. First of all, what is affect? In this context, affect is really just the word for the biological process of how we move into feeling emotions. It's just part of the way that God has wired us. So, based on the work of Tompkins, the psychology of affect tells us that the healthiest environment for us to thrive in is one where there is free expression of feelings and emotions. That makes sense, right? In order for me to be healthy and for us to have a positive relationship, I need to be able to tell you how something that you've said or done has affected me. And I also need to be humble enough to be able to hear that from you as well, without judging or devaluing you because of how you experienced something that I said or did. Now, it's important to note that we don't have to agree with everybody, right? There's some people that we're just not going to see eye to eye on with certain things, and that's okay. But we do want to put ourselves in a place of humility where we're seeking to understand where somebody with a different perspective is coming from, because in doing that, we keep our hearts in a place where we can see them as God does, which is simply as a human being worthy of respect and dignity and who has a voice that deserves to be heard. So, as you can see in this graphic in front of you, there's a spectrum of affect. Starting with positive affect, enjoyment, joy, interest, excitement, all the way down the spectrum through neutral and negative affects. So, ideally, what we want to do in an environment, whether that's a home, a school, a classroom, a community, a church, is create an everyday environment where we can maximize the experience of positive affect and minimize the experience of negative affect. Not that there can never be negative affect in that environment, but what we want to do is create a space where people can engage and experience those positive affects. And then when something does happen that kind of disrupts that experience, we also want to then be able to create another space to help them process that disruption and move past it so that they can return to experiencing those positive affects once again. And of course, with children, we well know that we are always going to need to model and guide them through the skills that are necessary for them to be able to do that. And what a restorative environment does, it sets us up to do all of those things really well. So we're not going to go through all of these affects, but we are going to hang out for just a minute on the affect of shame and kind of explore what shame is as an affect and what purpose it serves for us. So most of us come to the word shame with specific meaning and context that we've assigned to it based on our life experiences. So, what I encourage you to do is think about your experience with shame and how it might connect to what you're going to hear. What Tompkins discovered in his research is that shame is a very unique affect. It occurs anytime there's been a disruption in those positive affects of enjoyment, joy, interest, and excitement. Now, this is interesting and might be different than what we typically think about shame because that means that we can feel shame even if we haven't done anything wrong. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But as we kind of slip into shame because there's been a disruption of those positive affects, it essentially becomes this huge spotlight that turns inward and shines directly on our hearts to reveal what's going on inside of us and what's there. And because we often experience positive affect, most often in the context of relationships and community with others, then shame is the only affect that has an ability to draw our attention inward to ourselves as well as to whatever brokenness or disconnection there might be in our relationships. And what's so cool is that if we look at the scriptural account of Adam and Eve in Genesis chapters 2 and 3, we see this phenomenon at work in what scripture records about their responses. They disobey God, walk outside of the boundaries that He set for their protection and safety, and what happens? Sin enters into the world, enters into their hearts. And immediately, once that happens, they become aware of it. They experience shame. They hide from God because they know that something has now happened inside their hearts that's different, it's not good, and that there's brokenness and disconnection in their relationship with God and in their relationships with each other. And that's what I love about science and things like psychology. I'm never fearful of those things because they always just end up proving the things that God has already taught in His Word. So then the question becomes, what happens when we experience or feel shame? And to answer that question, we're going to look to the work of another expert in the field named Donald L. Nathanson. I'm going to give you a scenario. You might be able to put yourself in my shoes, but just listen to this. This weekend is my birthday, and so that has inspired the details of this scenario. So let's say that it's my birthday. My birthday falls on a work day this year. And let's say that birthdays are a really, really, really big thing to me. I've been at work wondering all day what kind of surprise gift or celebration, what kind of gesture my husband might do to celebrate with me. I come home from work, I walk in the door, I greet my husband, and figure out in about 5 minutes that he has totally and completely forgotten my birthday. All my hopes and dreams for this wonderful evening celebrating together are completely crushed. So I'm immediately yanked out of my positive affect of, let's say, interest or excitement and plunged deep into shame. That shame is like a huge spotlight that turns inward on me, magnifying what's in my heart, what's happening in this moment. It's personal. It hurts. I feel really, really, really bad about this. Now, if I have very mature, developed skills already in place to deal with that shame, I might take a deep breath, acknowledge my feelings of hurt and disappointment related to all of that shame and the situation, and then begin a conversation when I'm calm, saying something like, "It looks like you forgot that today's my birthday." And honestly, I'm really feeling hurt about that right now, and letting that conversation take place. Let's say, however, that for this example, it's my real life and I don't have the skills or that presence of mind in the moment because this is a really big deal to me and I'm struggling. It's overwhelmed my calm and I'm going to get stuck in that negative affect of shame. That experience is going to lead me to unconsciously behave in four possible ways, which Nathanson discovered, illustrated, and titled The Compass of Shame. There are 4 points on this compass, and I'm going to go through each one and give you an example of what my behavior might look like if I'm operating out of that point on the compass. So, the first one at the top is withdrawal, isolating oneself, running and hiding. If I'm going to withdraw in this situation, when I realize what's happened, that my husband forgot my birthday, I might just come in the door from work, say a brief hello, figure it out, keep quiet, and head off to my bedroom to watch Netflix for the night. I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm just going to completely disconnect from everybody and be by myself. That's what it might look like if I'm going to operate out of a shame response of withdrawal. To the right, we have a response that's called attack self. Self put down, masochism, in the most extreme form, even suicide. In this situation, if I'm going to attack myself, I might tell myself a story in my head that goes something like this: "This is all my fault. I should have reminded him earlier this week that it was my birthday. Why am I so stupid? Or maybe I might use some humor to self deprecate in some way and say, oh my gosh, I figured he'd forget my birthday. I can't do anything right around here. I'm really kind of a terrible wife. I mean, why would he even want to remember? Whatever it looks like, I'm going to be putting myself down and attacking myself. Let's move to the next point on the bottom, avoidance. This can look like denial, drug and alcohol abuse, distraction through thrill seeking in a more extreme form. In this situation, if I'm going to avoid what's going on, I might break out my laptop and do a bunch of online shopping. Or maybe I call up some friends, get all dressed up, do my makeup and everything for a night out on the town. I might go spend a bunch of money getting my hair done, purchasing something else that I want. I might even abuse drugs or alcohol if that's a struggle that I have in my life. Anything that's going to help distract me from what I'm feeling and what's being brought up in that moment. I'm just going to try to avoid it. And then finally, the last point on the compass, attack other. This is going to look like blaming the victim, lashing out verbally or physically. And if I'm going to go this route in this situation, I'm going to come at my husband with everything I've got. I'm going to externalize all of that pain and attempt to inflict it on him instead. I might yell or scream. I might say something like, I can't believe you forgot my birthday. You know how important my birthday is to me. You are just the worst. You clearly don't care enough to value the day I was born, and I deserve so much better than that. I can do that so easily because that's the kind of environment that I grew up in as a child. We all know what it's like to either act or be acted upon out of each of these 4 points on the compass. But the problem with them is that they just perpetuate harm. They keep us from doing the hard work of really looking inside, processing what that shame has highlighted within us. So for me in this situation, maybe that feeling of shame, again, I didn't do anything wrong initially, but I still feel that shame. Perhaps it's highlighted some insecurity in my relationship with my husband, or maybe that I've put him in charge of meeting a need that only God can meet in my life. And I need to do the difficult work of opening my heart up to that and allowing God to access and change that part of me rather than withdrawing, avoiding it, or attacking myself or my spouse. So, why is this important? I want to share some final thoughts with you before I leave you with a couple of reflection guiding questions. How we respond to shame reveals what's in our hearts. And as scripture teaches, God is all about the heart. So, I have a few scriptures that I want to share with you. Proverbs 4:23. I'm sure you're familiar with these. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Proverbs 27:19. As a face is reflected in water, so the heart reflects the real person. And finally, a good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart, and an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. What you say flows from what is in your heart, the words of Jesus in Luke chapter 6, verse 45. There are many other scriptures, and I'm sure you're thinking of some of them now, that illustrate how important the heart is to God. As Christian educators and leaders in a Christian school environment, you have the incredible and exciting privilege to also be actively involved in the discipleship of your teams, your leaders, and the students that you've been entrusted with. So, in addition to teaching, leading, administrating, whatever your role might be, in many ways, you're also pastoring and partnering with God to facilitate deep, life changing heart work. So, when we're able to start identifying and understanding our own shame responses, we can begin the process of inviting God into those responses, letting Him speak to us about the areas that we need continued healing, sanctification, and work, the work that He desires to do within our hearts. We can learn how to react less intensely, which will help us recover from our own shame responses more quickly and be better carers of the people that are around us. At the same time, we can also help those that God has entrusted to us by allowing Him to use us in His heart work within their lives. So when we have students or even coworkers who have a shame response, we can gently and compassionately just reflect what we're seeing in those shame responses. We can share the truths of scripture with them. We can pray with them and pray for them and continue walking alongside them through the ups and downs of those journeys. That's what a restorative environment looks like, always pointing them back towards our loving and gracious God. So, as we continue to close, here's just a couple questions that I want to leave you with. In the situation that I shared, in the examples of different shame responses, what are your negative ways of dealing with shame? What kind of resonated with you? What responses seem to be like a response that you might have? How do you see those shame responses play out in your school community? If you're a teacher, what do you notice in your students or in your coworkers? What do you notice in your team? And then finally, what are the godly ways that we can deal with shame? I want to thank you so much again for the opportunity to just share my heart and share some information. I hope that this has been beneficial to you, that it's blessed you, that it's given some things for you to think about and consider in your work with your teams and the students in your school community. And more than anything, I'm continuing to lift you up in prayer that God would continue to draw you close to Him as you consider these concepts, that He would continue to give you His heart for the people that He's entrusted to you. And I just pray so many blessings on your ministry. Thank you so much.